Welcome back to the TEHNC podcast. I'm Jonathan, and we are here to talk about Oppenheimer. And I'm here with my colleague Mark Allen Kaplan, PhD of the Integral Cinema Project. And we're going to talk about this amazing film. In my opinion, it's Christopher Nolan's best film ever. That could be a controversial take, but this is we're holding that this is a very close deep dive into humanity's first existential inflection point. Since the moment the atomic bomb was made, and even as they were making it, the scientists knew that they were embarking on something a quest that could end humanity as we know it. Literally, it was the first time that scientists have had to be aware, have that awareness in their knowledge, and kind of be planning for that. So this film definitely has that kind of overcurrent of that running through it, this sort of existential dread as they're doing it. It's a little bit of the Moloch dilemma. You might have seen some of the talk about Moloch, the demon who always wants bad outcomes to happen, not because we want them to happen, but because everyone else is incentivized to do them. And so you have to do it too. So then everybody gets incentivized to do this thing that nobody really wants. And that was what was happening here. The Nazis were working on an atomic bomb. The Japanese were working on an atomic bomb. Everybody knew there was going to be an atomic bomb, so they were just in a race to do it first. And we think this film does an amazing job of capturing that sort of existential dilemma of, do we do this? We have to do it, but we know as we're doing it that we're doing this incredibly dangerous and sort of reckless thing, but it would be more reckless not to do it. So, and it also just captures the sort of staggering intellectual achievement as well as part of it. And of course, it also captures the zeitgeist, the sort of times, what was going on, the kind of communist witch hunts that were sort of, you could see, starting to happen, even though Russia was technically our ally. So it's a very complex work, and I'll turn it over to you, Mark. You can talk about what you thought about Oppenheimer.
Okay, I agree with all that. Um, and I would say that it really captures for me the multi-dimensional reality of that moment in human history. It goes from everything from his consciousness to what's happening collectively across the planet. And it's just like, the relationships, the social um, and cultural waves happening. Just it's like you get in there's two terms in German that if we combine them really kind of capture for me what he's experimenting with here. So, and the two terms are Gestalt and Zeitgeist, as you first talked about there. And they're very similar because they're about a holistic felt sense of something. But the Gestalt, it's like this whole felt sense of something. And the Zeitgeist is the whole felt sense of this moment in our collective field.
Zeit is time, I believe.
Right. Yes. But it's of the times we're in. So like right now in this moment, so Gestalt focuses more on individual and Zeitgeist is more of a collective. And for me, he's really kind of melding those two together. So when we open, I want to focus just real quick on the opening and closing. And this really kind of puts together the Gestalt and the Zeitgeist. So at the beginning, the first shot is rain drops into this, looks like an asphalt parking lot, but it's just this, we're watching the puddles and the raindrops creating these waves. And he's staring at it. And the sound and the camera, it's very simple, but it's capturing something that is beautiful to me. And that is, if you've ever hung out with a physicist, they have a certain kind of perceptual feel where you could be talking to them and all of a sudden they'll focus on some thing happening, like, steam rising from their coffee or something, where it's like they've they've opened their eyes to these more subtle dimensions of reality, and they're starting to unpack it, and they can actually kind of, whoa, look at how that works, you know. And this opening from those little ripples in the um, pool, whatever it is, we then shift to these explosions in like this quantum field. And at the end, there's this moment where you're looking back on the whole Earth and bombs are blowing up, and we could see the missiles shooting up behind you. And then we pull back to the Earth and we see the explosions like ripples in that pond. So we get a really visceral, he takes us on this arc from the quantum waves in a tiny thing to this and the journey. So, I mean, to me, he's really kind of exploring the gestalt and zeitgeist of this moment in human history where we cracked open that door. I love the quote at the start: Prometheus stole fire from the gods and gave it to man. For this, he was chained to a rock and tortured for eternity. And in a way, the whole film is kind of like that. He was kind of like Prometheus. Anyway, so, but
Well,
the
that's the
journey,
book is called American Prometheus, I believe,
yes,
the book it's
that's
based
right.
on.
That's right. So for me, the reason why this is so important is right now we are in the midst of a very similar zeitgeist field in terms of with AI.
Existential risk, the possibility of existential risk.
We are all now kind of in that field of holy shit. We don't know what this is going to unleash, right? Like the scientists back then, they said, well, there's a possibility that if we blow this thing up, it can blow up the whole atmosphere and kill us all. It's like, so we don't know. We don't know, but there's this, we are in one of these moments.
It's a
And
beautiful
for us,
moment because,
yeah,
yeah, they're also making that point that there's a limit to what you can know theoretically without actual experiment. And we're sort of in that space with AI as well. We can only theorize what could happen with AI, but we don't know if we're unleashing something that will blow up the world. Yeah, I think he does a beautiful job with the film, obviously. It's also just there's a field, especially with the soundtrack by Ludwig Göransson, I believe is his name, the Swedish composer, who's just brilliant. And the sound is this very ubiquitous, visceral presence throughout the whole film, just kind of building that tension in your gut, as they get ready to do the first nuclear test, the first atomic explosion in Los Alamos. Just an incredible accompaniment. And we were going to talk a little bit about the energetic lens. That this is a film that's working with the energy lens a lot, and there is a very particular energy to this film that's different than even other Nolan films, and kind of reminded me of Kubrick, and reminded me a bit of Denis Villeneuve from Arrival and Dune. Does this as well? Kind of has an energetic feel that you can feel in your gut as you're in it. I mean, every film has that, but some of them are more specific and more visceral, I would say. And this one
definitely.
definitely takes
Definitely.
you into it.
Yeah. It's like you said, every film has an energetic expression, but some filmmakers have the capacity to really play with that in very powerful ways. And Kubrick is one of them. And so is, I can't pronounce his name, sorry. And
Denis Villeneuve,
Villeneuve is also
very
really an
masterful.
expert at that. And
Yep,
now
I we were
Nolan, he's played with it before, but this is really advanced. This
Yeah,
is
we've talked before about synchronization of the senses and complex synchronization of the senses. And in this case, it's sort of when you synchronize the sound and the visuals, all of the different aspects of the visual expression, which, as you pointed out before, I think here and elsewhere, involves color and light and rhythm and contrast and all these different visual elements. And of course, the temporal structure too, how it moves, how it cuts from one thing to another is part of the music of the film in a way, or part of the grammar of the film. And then, of course, the script is part of that. And when you synchronize all of those to a common purpose, you get a more powerful lived experience and you create more powerful energy in the film as well. And in this case, he's doing that and also synchronizing it with the evolutionary state structures going through their heads where they realize that we're entering a new phase of humanity in a way in which humans have now become the gods.
That's a great
So that new
point.
awareness.
Is that he's really captured that point of our technologies surpassing our capacity to handle them. It's almost like you feel like we need a higher consciousness in order to even deal with this. Like we're not ready for this. Oh my God. It's like,
and
yeah,
yet
there's
and
that
yet you can
feel.
see the myth and yet you can see the mythic consciousness field too of the military and the guy played by Casey Affleck, the general, I can't remember his name, or the one who's very anti-Russia because his father was Russian and he's fought Russians, and they're still very in this field of us versus them. So when Oppenheimer's like, well, we should share with the Soviets about what we're doing because they're our allies, and they're like, if they're our enemies, we mustn't. So you could see these two different fields, the pluralistic field pushing to be birthed at the moment when they realize that actually now the whole world is going to be has to deal with this all as one. And in fact, I think I've told you I read the book The Making of the Atomic Bomb, which is an incredible book, and a lot of what's in this film is from that as well, I think. And that talks a lot about how people like Niels Bohr were actually going to the president of the United States and telling him we need an international arms treaty, even as they were building the bomb. They knew this was coming, and they knew that we needed some kind of international arms control in order to not all blow each other up and to kind of regulate what was happening. And there was discussion about whether we should share this knowledge or not. And it was a very pregnant question even at the time as they were building it
Yeah.
and before they built it.
Yeah. You could feel the push towards an expansion of consciousness. I think there's that quote from Albert Einstein: we can't solve a problem with the consciousness that created it. And I
Mhm.
think that it kind of resonates here as well, because there's this kind of a natural gap between our advanced technologies and our collective consciousness to handle it healthy. And there's always been this kind of catch-up race, that we have as these new tech come out. The problem now is that it's exponential, and it's really hard for us to keep up. The gap is huge now. So this
Mhm.
is a very, I think, important film for this moment, since we're in a very similar place. And just to come back to the energy lens stuff that you were talking about here, just if you look at the opening, you could feel him playing with it. You've got the droplets and the sound of the rain, right? And there's this kind of this rhythm and pattern to it, both visually and sound and music. And then you cut to his expression, just like, he's gazing into it. And it's like you can feel this kind of just energy field, and then these explosions coming from this. So you've got this process, this movement from different kind of energy feelings, right? So looking at the drop of the rain is one kind of energetic feeling as we're watching it, right? And then just his stare and gaze is just the spaciness, but this penetrating, but it's still kind of this flow, right? This, and but then this, these, and then we go into it. It's kind of this setting up a kind of a induction for us to this process, that they're looking at all of these patterns and dimensions at the subatomic and quantum level, and then there it's going to lead us to this explosion. It beautifully captures that energetic kind of flow, right? It
Yeah,
brings us in.
it's a very masterful film. And also, Nolan obviously is famous for tricksy temporal structuring, jumping back and forth between different times. And this one, the first time I watched the film, it's a little hard to parse the first time, but I've watched it multiple times since then. It's very coherent. Even you're seeing the way he's paying the price for his attempt to move us into a more pluralistic mindset, because he's also being, having to go through all these humiliating court or whatever, hearings in which he's having to talk about his sex life and humiliate his wife and humiliate himself and literally be naked in front of them in one scene. I thought it was an incredible scene with that long cello. He's like just so you're seeing the personal and the interpersonal also, throughout this film, and how it affects them, how it affects how the tension of what they're doing and the stress. And a lot of these guys, the guys who are the scientists on there, were literally in exile from Nazi Germany. Either Hungarians or Germans or whatever they were. So even that is all in there as well. So it's a very sort of complex, woven tapestry. That's the other thing. It feels like this kind of tapestry because the time jumps, the way it's woven together is just much more complex, and for me, much more successful than a lot of his other films. Kind of astonishing to go from Tenet to this, to me. Tenet was like very kind of incomprehensible. I know you liked it more than I did.
Well, for me, Tenet and films like Inception, for me, they're more like grand experiments in cinematic expression, which turns me on.
Yeah,
I
well,
love those.
he is basically an avant-garde filmmaker, just working in the most like vast sort of scale.
I love those,
vast
but they are
commercial
experiments.
scale.
They are really big experiments. And for
Yeah,
me, I love
works
that.
a lot better. Inception works a lot better, I think, than Tenet, in my opinion. But this film, to me, maybe because it's based on a historical incident, is just much more grounded in something concrete. And the moment he meets General Grove and they start going back and forth, and that's to get that kind of popping dialogue, the movie just comes alive. And then even all of the stuff in the Manhattan Project for me is just quite fascinating to watch, and to not only watch the process they're going through, but also the process in their heads. You can feel their mental process and the stress, the anxiety of what they're doing, and the scale of it, the historical scale that they're all in. They can feel it.
That's the energy lens. That's the energetic lens. You said it. You could almost feel their consciousness, what they're going through. Yeah. He's really kind of, and that's the beauty to me. I think you may be right that this work kind of brings together his cinematic expression, experimentalism, but it's contained within a more organic, multidimensional human structuring, human experience structuring.
And a historical narrative. So, I mean, it's actually of a time, it's a real story.
Although he did historical narrative before, but
did he?
His war film.
Dunkirk.
Yeah.
Dunkirk. Yeah, that's another one that had kind of a tricksy time signature that didn't really work for me, although I like the film.
It worked for me. That worked for me. But,
I'm fond of it, but that thing of the 1 hour, 1 week, 1 day, 1 week, I guess it is something like that.
I thought it was brilliant, but that's But again, it's that as a filmmaker and whose focus is on cinematic language, that stuff turns me on.
Yeah, well, he is an incredible filmmaker.
With the language.
Huh? He's an incredible filmmaker, no doubt. I mean,
for me, he's kind of like Hitchcock, where I like to watch him as like instruction, like, oh, wow, look at how he's doing that. Look, oh, if you can do that, then you could do that. So for filmmakers, he's great.
Christopher Nolan, yeah.
Yeah,
But I
yeah,
mean, for me,
definitely.
this is the first film of his that I actually wanted to see multiple times. Also, because there's a heart in this film that's missing from some of his other films. You actually really feel the trauma that Oppenheimer goes through, and you really feel kind of the social trauma that everyone is going through because of this war and this fear and you know all these people who are each in their own field of what they care about, what they want to do. A real existential war was happening, so it really was an existential project for all of them, and they knew it. Well, we were both blown away by the film. Also, I mean, we should talk a little bit about how the zeitgeistiness of the film itself and the Barbenheimer moment. You know, we've talked about Barbie, and now we're talking about Oppenheimer, but the fact that these both came out at the same time and it became kind of a thing to see both of them, clearly they were both very resonant in their own way with the times we're in now. And Oppenheimer, I think a lot of people, even if they couldn't pinpoint why, they can sense that this is that moment about humanity's existential crisis, you know, an existential inflection point, and the bomb is still ever present. And now we have others like AI, as you say, and it's not the only one. You know, there's AI, there's nanotechnology, there's a lot of different exponential technologies that could potentially wipe us out.
Yes. So, and
And
I think that's an important kind of point. And as you were talking there, I was thinking, if you look at how Oppenheimer is kind of showing, it's kind of capturing the energetic experiential field of a, a similar existential moment for us right now. So
mm-hmm.
experiencing that, and then with Barbie, it's almost like it's also playing with culture war. It's getting into a different dimension of the existential inflection point,
The
but
culture
it's
war.
doing it in a lighter way. It's and so it's almost like this film is so heavy, and for me, this film was very hard for me to watch. I'm a very sensitive guy. It's like,
You're a
it
sensitive
just,
flower.
it wiped me out, man. It was just like, oh, it's like I felt this inflection point like so intense in my body. It was almost just like, it just exhausted me.
Right. Well, something else about this film is that, in a way, it's not only unfolding the historical events, but it's also showing you their ramifications into the future in real time. So you're feeling the future ramifications of everything that's happened and all of the shit they have to go through in the future that Oppenheimer has to go through and his wife has to go through. And it's showing you that as it's happening. So you can't really be happy for him that he's doing this great project because you know that he's got all this trauma in the future that you're
That's
seeing.
the gift. That's the gift here, is it's like using that kind of temporal structuring. He's continually anchoring us in the whole experience because we're going back and forth between what's leading up to it, the moment it happens, and the repercussions. He's reminding us constantly of the whole field. We're going back and forth between the whole field. So we get that full sense. And for me, that was so intense. And in a way, I had to have a Barbie to kind of chill out. But at least it was a chill out that wasn't in denial of of the inflection point. It's
Mm-hmm.
it didn't allow me to escape, but it allowed me to be in it without destroying me. It was, without shattering me. And I think that mixture, the more I think about it, could be a part of why it worked so well together, these two films.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. This sure was an amazing moment in history, though. These two films coming out.
I'm in awe.
Yep, we're both in awe of it, and hopefully you'll see it again if you haven't. If you've seen it, if you haven't seen it, go see it at least once. I think you have to watch it at least a couple times though, because the structure is so complex that there's a lot happening in this film,
Very
and there's
dense.
a
Yeah.
lot of things you'll miss the first time through, probably. So very
Yeah.
dense, powerful filmmaking, beautiful, cinematically beautiful, and
Amazing.
visceral. I
Yeah.
haven't felt that visceral, like, largely with that soundtrack too, the Ludwig Göransson track, which is just filled with these like long cello lines, sharp, stressful tension, kind of almost like a horror film, the way it does that. It is a kind of horror film in a way, but
It is. Yeah. Yeah.
yep, but very beautiful.
A beautiful horror
Awesome.
film.
And all the acting is great. We haven't really talked about any of the actors, but they're all awesome. So it's all good stuff. See
Yep.
it again. Thanks for watching. Hopefully, you enjoyed this discussion of Oppenheimer, and we'll see you all shortly. Cheers.